Hello and welcome back. I'm Jeremiah Sanchez, author of the Parachute Mind series, and today we're going to discuss the question, what if Jesus was an alien? When I conceived this channel, this question was one of the first ones I wanted to discuss. As someone who was raised up in the church and as an adult has spent most of their life immersed in scientific study, this is a subject that is both personal to me and fascinating. I took my time and I wrote this video out a few times to make sure that I approached it tactfully in a way that respected other people's beliefs while also challenging them to think outside the box and also trying to shed some light on topics that other people may doubt. It's a lot of tricky things to try to balance properly, so here we go. This video is not meant to sway your mind in any specific direction, but merely discuss a topic as open-mindedly as we can. Now, before we get started, I need to make my intentions clear. There are two extremes I'm actively trying to avoid when making this. The first one is this is not a preaching video. I'm not trying to sell you on any faith or belief or religion or push anything down anyone's throat. This is all intended to be philosophical and theoretical. On the other hand, this video is not intending to mock or insult anyone of faith or their belief system. Once again, this is only philosophical and theoretical. I created this channel with the desire to at least consider other people's viewpoints and opinions. That's what helps us grow and helps our minds expand. That being said, there will always be professional victims that are looking for ways to be offended, and if that's you, I probably can't help you. I'd recommend turning this video off before we delve much deeper. For as the great philosopher Aristotle said, it is the mark of an intelligent mind to be able to consider an idea without accepting it. In other words, your mind is like a parachute. It works best when it's open. Okay. Regardless of what you do or do not believe, this video requires two things. Firstly, a mathematical probability, and secondly, a spiritual assumption. So, if you are open-minded enough to continue, let us set the foundation upon which we can build some bizarre and peculiar what-ifs. This entire topic has fascinated me for years and stems from the first thing we need, the mathematical probability that we are not alone in the universe. Assuming there are countless other planets throughout the cosmos, literally countless, that means that there are likely millions upon billions upon trillions upon gabba-jabba-dillions of souls scattered throughout the universe. Are you with me so far? Great. The second thing we'll need for this video is the spiritual assumption. So Jesus was not only a real person in history, but he was who he said he was. Let's assume that he was the Son of God. Or if it's easier to wrap your mind around the possibility scientifically, he was a higher dimensional being. Once again, this video is not intending to sound preachy or sacrilegious, but before we continue, this video does require that you operate under the assumption that A, there is a God, and B, that there are potentially millions upon billions upon trillions of planets that host intelligent life. Creationism and evolution holding hands. Woo! Let's party! Aliens, one of my favorite topics ever. Varying biological beings of infinitely differing shapes, sizes, colors, intelligences, developments. Let's say that they are real and that they all have souls. Additionally, one thing we do know for a fact is that every single planet can be a different age. They formed at different times. That means that some planets are only in their first phase, mapping out their worlds with technology barely beyond inventing the wheel and discovering fire. Some worlds will only be in their second phase, exploring the scientific possibilities held within their world, going from agriculture to industry to electricity to technology. Some planets would be in their third phase, exploring beyond their world into the stars. According to the Bible, Jesus visited us, was born and raised, taught, and was executed all toward the end of our first phase, nearing our second phase. We were still mapping out our globe, and we had tools more advanced than cavemen. We had agriculture, and we had the beginning stages of civilization. Okay, now, the what-if questions. I want to start off with one that the more I think about it, it just blows my mind. Assuming Jesus was who he said he was, God, a higher dimensional being, however you want to define it, that means that he is beyond time. If you truly believe that God is all-powerful, or if you're willing to consider that possibility, it means that he is beyond time. To argue against that means that you do not believe he is all-powerful. So what that means is that Jesus chose geographically where, and throughout history or the future, when to visit us. He could have chosen any time, all the way back from when, biblically, the earth was created, Adam and Eve, anywhere through the Old Testament, where he did in the New Testament, anywhere in our history books, now, or even in the future. But he chose when he did. That was a deliberate decision, which then begs the follow-up question, why? Why then? My unprofessional opinion is that he visited us toward the end of our first phase because our beliefs were more pliable and open back then. We were developed and intelligent enough to understand faith and the concepts of heaven and hell. Our minds were able to recognize, but not quite yet developed enough to be able to dissect miracles. But we were not so advanced that we were jaded, distracted, or so educated that we just automatically rejected the possibility of miracles. Take this part personally. You live in today's world. Imagine some guy just shows up out of nowhere and says that he is the Son of God here to save us. How would you react? My point is that the biblical times in our world's history were an open-minded sweet spot. What if Jesus visited us in our second phase? For example, what if he came to Earth during the Industrial Revolution? Rather than riding a donkey, Jesus would have arrived in an early automobile, or by train. The 12 apostles probably would have been coal workers, covered in grime and smears. I can picture Jesus' mustache with those twirly little wisps. Would we have seen his miracles as wonders, or would we see them as new displays of the most modern steam power and machinery? Because back then, that was the explanation for everything. So-and-so invented a new mass-producing fish and bread machine. It's going to revolutionize the world. The more we understand, the less wowed we are. Weirdly, that's also around the same time that Frankenstein was first released, which means that the whole concept of reanimating the dead had become a public electric fantasy. Our brains might have connected dots that undermined the miraculousness of Lazarus' resurrection or Jesus' return from the grave. Would we see him rising from the dead as a heavenly miracle? Or would we assume that there were electrical elements to his reappearance? Or what if Jesus came during our third phase? I'm not going to lie, this one kind of tickled me a bit more than I expected. Imagine the year is 1969 and we just landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong just put the first set of human footprints on a celestial body that is not the Earth. And then some dude just shows up out of nowhere claiming to be the Son of God. How do you think we'd react? Because I'm aware that there would be an overwhelming wave of mockery and doubt, but still, that timing would be very interesting. We venture beyond our atmosphere for the very first time, and then Jesus arrives. It would feel very much like an ominous cause and effect, like we breached the universe and it answered with a savior. I honestly believe we would have been more receptive in that brief window in time than we would have been throughout our second phase. What do you think? And Jesus spent time with sinners and prostitutes and fishermen. He didn't kick it with the cool kids. So I picture him rolling up in a dilapidated van and all the apostles pouring out like a clown car. Our eyes were so set on the stars, I wouldn't be surprised if Jesus showed up at that point if he was met with the word alien. And those are just a couple random times and scenarios in our history in different locations. Not only do epochs vary, but so do cultures across the globe. So when and where in Earth's history do you think would have been the most interesting time and place for God to visit us as one of us? Because the Bible recounts a Middle Eastern Jesus. What would have happened if he was performing his miracles in Russia, China, Mexico, the USA, Bangladesh? The socio-cultural consequences would greatly vary depending on where he lived out his life. History is a gold mine of variations peppered across the globe. One more earthly what if that has always fascinated me, arguably more than the rest of this entire topic, is the crucifix. Christians and many other faiths revere the crucifix because of the symbolism that it represents. I can only imagine how Jesus must feel about crosses. Perhaps he despises them for all of the obvious PTSD reasons. Maybe he's grateful for their memorialization because of what they represent. Either way, the reason that crosses are the #1 recognized symbol across the entire planet is simply due to them being the legal form of execution at that time and place. If you take Jesus out of it, crosses were nothing more than condemned criminals' dread. It was their last day. That's all it represented before his arrival. They're the equivalent to us wearing necklaces with symbols for lethal injection, the electric chair, a hangman's noose, a firing squad. If Jesus was executed for his crimes today, at least in the United States, he would likely be put to death by lethal injection. Can you imagine churches with electric chairs at the top of their steeples instead of crosses? Or necklaces with the holy symbolism of a noose? Maybe tattoos with firing squads and Bible verses. Throughout history, some of the many other legal forms of execution include, but are not limited to, beheadings, burned at the stake, sawn in half, stoning, hung, strung, and quartered, being obliterated by a cannon at point blank. Literally, they would bind your hands and feet apart and then roll a cannon up to the small of your back and boom. Torsos were liquefied, arms and legs and heads all shot off in 5 different directions. Could you imagine if Jesus was executed in that way? For the sake of symbolism, any one of those could have become the icon for salvation, venerated on steeples, necklaces, tattoos, or anywhere else that you normally find crucifixes. I know this next question is weird, but what would be the most interesting form of execution to kneel before? Once again, I'm not intending anything offensive or sacrilegious, I'm just genuinely curious. Looking at crosses objectively, we are reactively peculiar. Alright, let's leave Earth now. Heaven. Wherever heaven is, another place, another dimension, it doesn't matter. Wherever Jesus calls home, wherever heaven actually is, I think it's safe to assume that Jesus wants to save as many souls as he can. While I am constantly struggling to understand what it is that I truly and personally believe, all those detailed and subtle and intricate ins and outs of faith and belief and religion and God and all of that, one thing that I've always seen as a constant is that the way Jesus is depicted in the Bible is loving. And based off that assumption and that understanding, I believe it is believable that he would want to save as many souls from as many different places as he can. Also, the way that Jesus biblically leaves at the end of his stay on earth further suggests that he has no problem visiting other worlds. I think it's worth noting that Jesus left via physical ascension. Wherever heaven is, he didn't suddenly just vanish. He didn't step into another dimension. He physically and visibly left by rising up into the sky. I'm not even trying to suggest anything with that. All I'm saying is that if you go that way, the next step is space. It's just a curious decision. But moving forward, let's assume, for the sake of this video, that Jesus visits every single planet with intelligent life on it. If he does, do you think he visits them all at comparable stages of development? Does he always visit them when they are young, at similar evolutionary step as our humanity was during biblical times, or do you think it varies? Do you think he would go to each world with the intention of being executed each time? Because that would suck. According to the Bible, that was the plan from day one. He came here knowing full well that he was going to be murdered, brutally, by the very souls he came here to save. And if mathematical probability intersects with spiritual faith on this graph, that would suggest the need and requirement for repetitive death. It's not like he could just do it once, go to other worlds and say, oh, I already took care of that back on Earth. That would dull the impact and wouldn't feel like the sacrifice. It wouldn't make him the martyr. They wouldn't be able to relate to that. It wouldn't be in their history books. They wouldn't tell the story of him coming to save them and dying. He would need to do it every single time on every single planet. That would take the sacrifice that billions already revere as holy and amplify it exponentially, like super exponentially. All right, some specific what-if questions. What if you could harness light like the characters do in the Parachute Mind series and travel between worlds in the relative blink of an eye? And for the sake of this video, which has absolutely nothing to do with the plot of the books, let's say you knew when and where God was going to be on each individual planet. What would you do? Would you follow him like a groupie? Would you try to convince the natives and the indigenous that he was God and that they should not kill him because of that? Would you do nothing but observe and listen to his teachings, knowing that his intention going there was to be the martyr? Or on the flip side of what if, would you be the one to hold the nails, so to speak? If you could intercept him during one of his visits on an alien world, what would you say to him? What would you ask? These are questions I have pondered many times over, and my answers constantly shift and change and evolve as I learn more, as I feel more. And I truly believe that if you take the time to ask yourself these questions genuinely, sincerely, and really meditate on what they mean, what they represent, without just looking for a place to stick a punchline, they can be difficult to answer. Or at least they are for me. Either way, I cannot wait to read your answers and ideas and possibly start a dialogue about what if Jesus was an alien. Thank you so much for joining me on this video. And as always, may death not find you sleeping.